Welcome. Today we're covering quite a range of global developments. We'll touch on a major power outage in Europe, the aftermath of an attack in Kashmir, a ceasefire proposal for Ukraine, and several other key stories unfolding right now.
Absolutely. It's a busy news day. These events, well, they really span the globe and highlight some serious ongoing challenges. Infrastructure, security, geopolitics, you name it.
Let's start in Europe then, with that power cut across Spain and Portugal. It hit on Monday, didn't it?
That's right, around midday GMT. And it was pretty massive. We saw reports of stranded trains, I think 11 initially.
Wow. And widespread blackouts.
Yeah, affecting shops, homes, restaurants. People even got trapped in lifts. Initially, some operators were talking about hours, maybe even 10 hours or potentially a week for full restoration in Portugal.
A week. That's huge.
It is, though thankfully, by Monday night, Spain had restored about 50%, and Portugal had power back to around 750,000 customers, but a state of emergency remained.
And the cause?
Mhm.
Any ideas?
Still under investigation. Importantly, though, both the Spanish and Portuguese PMs and the European Council president have said there's no indication of a cyber attack so far.
Okay. And warnings were issued.
Yes, especially in Madrid, stay put, avoid roads, only use emergency lines for, actual emergencies. But by evening, lights were coming back on in some areas.
The knock-on effects must have been significant. Travel.
Definitely. Cirium data showed 96 flights canceled out of Portugal, 45 from Spain. Businesses like IKEA had to use backup generators, even stopped letting people in. The Madrid Open Tennis was canceled for the day.
Right. And it wasn't just Spain and Portugal.
No, Andorra and parts of France felt it too, though the Balearic and Canary Islands were okay.
The personal stories must have been something else.
Oh, absolutely. People described a hysterical atmosphere, mobile phones down, gridlock in Madrid. Someone mentioned being mid-grocery shop when the power went. A barber in Lisbon finishing a haircut by window light.
Just trying to carry on.
Exactly. Strange walks home with no traffic lights, difficulty getting updates, limited phone service in Barcelona, people searching for generator fuel down in the southeast.
It really shows our reliance, doesn't it? Airports must have been scrambling.
Using generators, yes. Concerns about flight disruptions, payment terminals running out of battery, petrol stations closing or unable to take card payments, even an orchestra stranded in Madrid. Tough if you didn't have cash.
Someone called it a little medieval, but also maybe a nice atmosphere with candlelight.
Yeah, a strange mix, I suppose. Resourcefulness and maybe a bit of unexpected community spirit in places.
Okay, let's shift focus to South Asia. It's been a week since that terrible attack in Kashmir. How are things there now?
Well, the reports from Pahalgam describe a sort of quiet desolation. This was near Baizaran, where tragically 26 people were killed. Tourism has, understandably, taken a massive hit.
A few tourists are returning, though.
A small number, apparently, to the main high street. But this attack, one of the deadliest in recent years, really sparked widespread anger in India.
And increased tensions with Pakistan.
Yes, definitely. Retaliatory measures, speculation about a potential Indian military response, the fact that tourists were targeted, which is rare, shocked locals and businesses profoundly.
A local politician urged people to remember the Kashmiris who helped, right?
Yes, a call for unity. But the economic impact is stark, tour operators reporting 80 to 90% cancellation rates. There's confusion among potential tourists, worries about war looming.
And that big infrastructure project, the railway bridge.
The inauguration of the world's highest single-arch rail bridge connecting the Kashmir Valley, well, its status is now described as uncertain.
The chief minister paid tribute.
In the assembly, yes. He noted people from across India were attacked after his invitation, and tragically, he couldn't ensure their safe return.
And there's been controversial action by security forces.
Demolitions of properties linked to suspected militants. Regional leaders support action against militants, but have questioned demolishing family homes, calling to punish the guilty without harming innocents. It's a very tense situation.
Turning now to Ukraine. Russia has proposed a ceasefire.
A 3-day one, yes, proposed by President Putin to coincide with Orthodox Easter around May 8th.
How has Ukraine responded?
With skepticism. They've questioned the delay, asking why not an immediate ceasefire of, say, at least 30 days if Russia is actually sincere.
There's history here, isn't there, with past Easter ceasefires?
There is. Ukraine accused Russia of repeatedly violating a previous one, so there's a strong sense this might be Moscow trying to paint itself as the peacemaker and Kiev as the one prolonging things.
And recent comments from the U.S. from Trump.
He criticized Russian missile strikes on civilian areas, which some saw as perhaps waning patience. The White House position is they want to see a permanent ceasefire first.
The Trump administration had pushed for a longer one before.
Correct, a 30-day unconditional ceasefire. Ukraine agreed then, but Russia didn't. Now, Russian officials are apparently already using this 3-day offer to portray President Zelensky negatively if he rejects it.
So prospects for a real pause seem slim right now.
It looks that way. The conditions, the timing, the public messaging, it all points to continued deep mistrust and complex maneuvering rather than an imminent breakthrough for peace.
Okay, let's move to Yemen. There are reports of civilian casualties after a U.S. strike.
Yes, claims following a strike on what's described as a migrant detention center in Saada, which is Houthi-controlled territory.
Who's making the claims?
The Houthi-run authorities are reporting dozens of civilian deaths. It's crucial to note these reports couldn't be immediately verified independently.
And the center held migrants.
Reportedly, yes. Around 115 Africans, mostly Ethiopians, were said to be there when it was hit multiple times. Videos have emerged showing bodies being recovered.
Any eyewitness accounts?
One injured man said he was hit while sleeping. A Somali community leader described a tragic and horrific scene, mentioning burnt bodies, though noted fewer Somalis were killed as some had apparently been moved earlier.
And the location. Near a military base.
The facility was described as being in an open area, not near a military site. Al-Masira, the Houthi outlet, also reported 8 killed in separate U.S. strikes overnight in Sana'a.
What has the U.S. military, CENTCOM, said?
They've stated they limit disclosure of operations for security reasons. It's a difficult situation, and migrants keep arriving in Yemen despite the conflict, driven by instability and climate issues in the Horn of Africa.
This isn't the first claim of civilian casualties from U.S. strikes recently, is it?
No. Earlier this month, the Houthis claimed U.S. strikes on the Ras Issa oil terminal killed 74 civilians. CENTCOM stated they destroyed Houthi fuel and revenue capabilities there.
And this comes after previous large-scale strikes ordered by Trump and warnings to Iran.
Right. CENTCOM has vowed to ratchet up the pressure for freedom of navigation. The Houthis, in turn, claimed they retaliated by targeting the USS Harry S. Truman carrier group. It's a very volatile part of the world.
Shifting focus now. Images have been released of Pope Francis's final resting place.
Yes, his tomb at the Santa Maria Maggiore Basilica in Rome. Just a simple stone slab with a single white rose on it in the pictures released.
He was laid to rest privately after the public funeral.
That's correct. Thousands have already visited the tomb. He apparently had a long connection to that basilica and expressed his wish to be buried there back in 2022.
The funeral itself was a major event.
Huge. Attended by numerous heads of state, government figures, monarchs, and hundreds of thousands of Catholics. The cardinal's homily emphasized the Pope's call to build bridges, not walls.
It was also where Trump and Zelensky met briefly, wasn't it?
It was, yes, and the procession through Rome after the funeral drew about 140,000 people. He's his first pope since Leo XIII to be buried outside the Vatican.
And now attention turns to his successor.
Exactly. The process for selecting the next pope is underway. A conclave could happen relatively soon, perhaps May 5th or 6th, with a record number of cardinals eligible to vote.
Now, something quite different. A valuable painting damaged in the Netherlands.
Yes, Mark Rothko's Gray, Orange on Maroon, number 8, estimated value around 50 million euros, was damaged by a child at the Museum Boijmans van Boningen in Rotterdam.
Oh, dear. How bad is the damage?
The museum described it as superficial, small scratches in the unvarnished paint layer. They're seeking conservation expertise and expect it will be shown again.
Unvarnished paintings are particularly tricky, right?
They are very susceptible to damage. Restoring Rothko is known to be difficult because of the complex materials and that lack of varnish. This incident definitely has implications, especially for museums considering more open displays.
What happens now in terms of repair and liability?
The museum is considering the next steps for treatment. They haven't commented on liability, but apparently they have billed visitors for damage in the past. It recalls that deliberate vandalism of another Rothko at the Tate Modern back in 2012.
Do museums handle damage by children differently?
Policies vary. There was a contrasting case in Israel where a family whose child broke an ancient jar was actually invited back. Although, on another note, a Dutch town hall admitted accidentally throwing out 46 artworks last year, so accidents happen in various ways.
Okay, let's head to Washington, D.C. Arrests made in the theft of Kristi Noem's handbag.
Yes, 2 men have been arrested. This relates to the theft of the Homeland Security Secretary's designer bag back on Easter Sunday.
What are the details?
Mario Bustamante Leyva was arrested Saturday, and an alleged accomplice, Christian Rodrigo Montechino Sanzanat, was picked up in Miami on Sunday. Leyva faces charges including robbery, aggravated identity theft, and wire fraud.
Allegedly involved in other incidents, too.
Yes, authorities linked him to other robberies, spending proceeds on gift cards and hotels. He allegedly used Noam's credit card at a restaurant shortly after the theft, which was caught on video. Montechino Sanzanat is also linked to a pattern of robberies and thefts in D.C.
What was actually stolen from the bag?
Noam reported about $3,000 in cash, apparently meant for treating her children and grandchildren, plus credit cards, her Homeland Security badge, medication, and her driver's license.
And her security detail didn't notice.
Apparently not immediately, no. Secret Service agents were present. Noam herself stated the suspect was a career criminal who had been in the country illegally for years. Bustamante Leyva, it turns out, was previously jailed in London for thefts in 2015.
A truly horrific incident in Canada now. The car attack in Vancouver.
Yes, absolutely tragic. A man has now been charged with 8 counts of second-degree murder after a car drove into a crowd at a street festival. The death toll is at least 11, including a 5-year-old girl.
Was the suspect known to police?
Yes, he was known prior to this attack, which happened at the annual Lapu Festival. The Filipino community is understandably just grieving.
Eyewitness accounts must be harrowing.
Extremely. People described a black SUV just hitting everyone, multiple casualties, sheer panic. Bystanders actually detained the suspect before police took him into custody.
And the death toll might rise.
Police have indicated it could, sadly. There's no evidence suggesting terrorism at this point. The suspect apparently has a significant history related to mental health issues.
The festival itself commemorates a Filipino hero.
Yes, Lapu. Police had done a threat assessment beforehand. The street where it happened had food trucks, but no barriers were in place. It's being called a watershed moment for city officials.
The community response.
Shock, sorrow, confusion, people checking on loved ones. A candlelight vigil has been held, flowers laid at the scene.
This happened just before the federal election, too.
It did. Prime Minister Carney canceled large gatherings. He visited the scene and met with the victims' families. Opposition leader Poilev also made an unscheduled stop to meet with the Filipino community. Leaders across the spectrum expressed shock.
Now, a deportation controversy in the U.S. What's happening there?
This involves 2 mothers and 3 children deported to Honduras from Louisiana. What makes this particularly concerning is that 2 of the children, aged 2 and 4, are U.S. citizens.
U.S. citizens deported.
That's the core of the issue. And allegedly, the 4-year-old has stage 4 cancer and was sent without her medication. The ACLU has raised serious due process concerns. One mother was pregnant, and the families had lived in the U.S. for years.
What are the courts saying?
A federal judge expressed strong suspicion about the lack of meaningful process for the 2-year-old U.S. citizen child.
How is the administration responding?
Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, defended the removals. He argued the mothers chose for their citizen children to be removed with them, stating that having a U.S. citizen child doesn't grant immunity from deportation. He dismissed the term deported for the children, saying their parents made that decision.
This echoes past controversies, doesn't it?
It certainly recalls the family separations policy. At the same time, the administration, through figures like Leave It, also highlighted a recent immigration raid in Colorado Springs, detaining over 100 undocumented immigrants and seizing weapons and drugs. So it's part of a broader enforcement picture.
Turning to Africa now. A minister sacked in Namibia.
Yes, the agriculture minister, McAlbert Hangari. He was sacked after being accused of raping a 16-year-old girl 5 years ago.
And there's more to it.
He was also arrested for allegedly trying to bribe the victim, who is now 21, to withdraw the case. This is happening against a backdrop of what's described as widespread gender violence in Namibia.
Questions about his appointment.
Yes, an opposition party criticized the vetting process, alleging a criminal investigation was already open when he was appointed. This comes not long after the president unveiled a cabinet that was praised for its female representation.
Let's talk sports for a moment. A record in cricket.
A pretty amazing one. In the Indian Premier League, the IPL, a 14-year-old player for the Rajasthan Royals, Vaibhav Suryavanshi, became the youngest ever to hit a century in men's T20s.
14? That's incredible. How fast was the century?
Of just 35 balls, it's the second fastest ever in the IPL and the fastest by an Indian player. He ended up scoring 101 off 38 balls, hitting 7 fours and 11 sixes.
Wow. Did his team win?
They did, by 8 wickets. Suryavanshi actually became the youngest IPL player earlier in April and hit his very first ball for 6. He had a huge partnership of 166 runs with Yashasvi Jaiswal.
Who holds the absolute fastest record?
That's still Chris Gale, who did it in 30 balls back in 2013. But this victory ended a 5-game losing streak for Rajasthan. Suryavanshi seems like a huge talent, signed for over £100,000, scored a century for India under-19s when he was 13, plays first-class cricket too.
Back to Europe. Police raids in France.
Yes, raids across the country targeting prisons. This follows a wave of attacks on prisons and prison staff.
What kind of attacks?
Well, there was a serious one at Toulon's La Farliade prison involving a Kalashnikov on April 15th. Reports say there have been at least 65 attacks against prisons or staff since mid-April.
Who's behind them?
A group claiming to defend prisoners' rights claimed responsibility on Telegram. President Macron has promised the attackers will be found and punished.
And arrests have been made.
Anti-terror prosecutors announced 25 arrests on Monday, some actually inside prisons. Ministers are praising investigators and promising tougher action on drug trafficking, which seems linked. There's also a bill heading to Parliament to create a special prosecutor's office with new powers.
Now, a significant confirmation from North Korea regarding Ukraine.
Yes, for the first time, North Korea has officially confirmed sending troops to fight for Russia in Ukraine.
What do they say specifically?
State media, KCNA, reported that their soldiers helped completely liberate the Kursk border region, following an order from Kim Jong-un. This comes after Russia's chief of staff publicly praised North Korean troops for their heroism.
Western intelligence had suspected this.
For some time, yes. Officials previously estimated at least 1,000 troops might have died out of perhaps 11,000 sent. The U.S. stated North Korea must bear responsibility for perpetuating the war.
This deployment aligns with their treaty.
Yes, their mutual defense treaty with Moscow. Kim called the fighters heroes, representing the honor of the motherland, emphasizing the alliance and brotherhood and friendship proven by blood with Russia, pledging more support.
What happens to the troops now?
The report didn't mention their fate after the mission in Kursk. These deployment reports first emerged back in October, following closer ties between Kim and Putin.
A rather unusual rescue story from Japan.
Yes, on Mount Fuji. A 27-year-old Chinese university student had to be rescued twice in just 4 days.
Twice? What happened?
He was climbing outside the official season, which is discouraged due to harsh conditions. First, he lost his crampons on one trail and needed a helicopter rescue. Then he went back apparently to get his belongings, including his phone, and needed rescuing again due to altitude sickness.
A cautionary tale, really.
Definitely highlights the risks of climbing out of season on a mountain like Fuji.
Okay, tensions rising in the South China Sea.
It appears so. Chinese state media reported their Coast Guard seized a tiny sandbank, Sandy Cay, escalating the dispute with the Philippines. Images were released showing Chinese officers on the reef.
How did the Philippines respond?
They later said they landed personnel on 3 sandbanks, even mimicking the Chinese photo pose. It's unclear if Sandy Cay was one of those 3. The Philippines also reported the illegal presence of Chinese vessels near another sandbank and reaffirmed their sovereignty claims.
This area is sensitive, isn't it?
Very. Sandy Cay is near a Philippine military outpost used to track Chinese movements. While there's no sign of permanent Chinese occupation yet, these confrontations have been increasing.
And the U.S. reaction?
The White House called the reports deeply concerning, warning about regional instability and violations of international law. This is happening as U.S. and Philippine forces conduct their annual Balikatan war drills, which China criticizes.
Let's circle back to Canada and the election campaign. We mentioned the Vancouver attack casting a shadow, but the polls shifted too.
Yes, it's been described as a stunning reversal. The Liberals under Carney, who were trailing significantly, gained ground. Final polls showed them slightly ahead, though conservative leader Poilievre still claimed a potential victory was possible.
And President Trump's influence was a factor.
A major one, apparently. His talk about tariffs and Canada potentially becoming the 51st state seemed to fuel Canadian nationalism and anger, really impacting the campaign dynamics.
So the election became partly a referendum on handling Trump.
For many voters, yes. Carney emphasized experience to counter what he called an existential threat from Trump, while Poilievre focused on domestic issues like housing costs and crime, framing it as a lost liberal decade.
And U.S. officials kept weighing in.
U.S. Secretary of State Rubio reiterated Trump's view of Canada as a potential state. It really kept the issue front and center. We saw a record number of Canadians casting advance ballots, too.
Regional differences played a role as well.
Always do in Canada. The campaign focus differed. Like in Nunavut, concerns about food security versus Arctic security. Running an election there has unique challenges. Travel, language, weather, even wildlife. And Alberta separatism, fueled partly by Trump's rhetoric and the liberal poll surge, was a talking point, with Premier Smith warning of a national unity crisis.
Now, more tension in the Middle East, Israel striking near Beirut.
Yes, Israel announced it struck what it described as a Hezbollah store of precision-guided missiles in Beirut's southern suburbs, the Dahi area.
How has Lebanon reacted?
The Lebanese presidency condemned the strike, calling on the U.S. and France to pressure Israel to cease attacks and uphold the ceasefire. This was the first Israeli strike in Dahi for almost a month, potentially straining that fragile cessation of hostilities.
Israel's justification.
They claimed the missile storage violated understandings and posed a threat. Netanyahu's office asserted that Dahi wouldn't be a safe haven for Hezbollah. The UN coordinator urged restraint from all sides.
Staying in the region, the aftermath of that huge port explosion in Iran.
The initial mourning seems to be turning to anger. That explosion at Shahid Rajeh port killed at least 40 people and injured over 1,000.
Are the fires out?
Reports suggest fires were still burning, with a toxic cloud over the area. Residents were advised to stay indoors. Schools and offices closed nearby.
Any idea on the cause? There was speculation.
Yes, speculation including reports from the New York Times citing a source linked to the IRGC suggesting sodium perchlorate, a missile fuel ingredient, might have exploded. Iranians are questioning authorities' competence regarding storing flammable materials.
What are officials saying?
President Pezeshkian visited and ordered an investigation. The Defense Ministry denied military fuel was involved. The Customs Office suggested a fire at a hazardous materials depot. Initial warnings about food shortages were later downplayed. Russia even offered firefighting aircraft.
The economic impact must be a worry.
Absolutely. That port handles about 80% of Iran's imports, so any long-term disruption is a major concern.
Let's move north. Greenland's position on U.S. ambitions.
Greenland's new Prime Minister, Jens Frederik Nielsen, made it very clear. The island is not a piece of property that can be bought. This was a direct response to President Trump's repeated calls for U.S. control.
He said this alongside the Danish PM.
Yes, Mette Frederiksen in Copenhagen. They emphasized unity against what they termed disrespectful U.S. rhetoric. Nielsen is now heading back to Greenland with Denmark's King Frederik for a royal visit.
This issue caused outrage before, didn't it?
It did, both in Denmark and Greenland. Trump had claimed control was essential for security. Both Nielsen and Frederiksen said they're willing to talk with Trump, but stressed the need for respect. It follows Frederiksen's blunt, "you can't annex other countries" message earlier, and a controversial visit by U.S. VP Vance. Greenland's new government, by the way, favors a gradual approach to independence.
And in South Africa, pushback against U.S. influence.
A senior ANC figure, Gwede Mantashe, defended South Africa's sovereignty amid growing tensions with the U.S., particularly over race relations and proposed land law changes.
What sparked his comments?
He criticized South Africans who are apparently calling on President Trump to punish the country. These tensions have also played out online, for instance on Elon Musk's X platform regarding land ownership.
South Africa appointed an envoy to ease tensions.
Yes, after their ambassador was expelled from Washington, Mantashe also made comments about potentially integrating the all-white separatist town of Orania, stressing that hatred can never survive peace.
Checking back on Gaza, any progress on a ceasefire?
Qatar claims there's been slight progress, but significant hurdles definitely remain.
What are the reported demands now?
Hamas is now reportedly seeking a deal for the release of all hostages and an end to hostilities for at least 5 years. There's even talk they might consider disarming if Israel fully withdraws from Gaza, but that seems highly unlikely to be agreed upon by the Israeli government.
What's the context of these talks?
Israel imposed a complete blockade on Gaza in early March and resumed attacks later that month. The U.S. has encouraged a reformed Palestinian Authority, the PA, to govern Gaza post-war.
But Netanyahu opposes that.
Yes, he opposes both a PA role and Palestinian statehood. Meanwhile, PA President Abbas has named a deputy in the PLO, which some see as signaling succession planning. The PA leadership insists it's ready to govern Gaza, but faces criticism for its past actions.
Let's take a brief look back in history now, African popes.
It's fascinating, isn't it? North Africa was once a real heartland of Christianity, producing some very influential popes during the Roman Empire.
Like who?
Well, there was Pope Victor I, likely of Berber origin. He's known for establishing Sunday as the day for Easter, resolving the big Easter controversy of the time. Then Pope Miltiades, whose reign saw Christianity becoming more accepted by Roman emperors.
And perhaps the most significant.
Pope Gelasius I. He's considered the most important of the three. He was the first officially called Vicar of Christ, developed the influential doctrine of the two swords, asserting papal authority over secular rulers, and even established St. Valentine's Day as a feast day.
Do we know what they look like?
No accurate visual descriptions exist. And it's important to remember race wasn't conceived in the same way back in the Roman Empire as it is today.
Why no African popes since Gelasius?
Several factors. The weakening of the North African Church due to the fall of Rome and later Muslim incursions played a big part. Then, for centuries, there was pretty much an Italian monopoly on the papacy. This is despite Christianity being very strong across Africa today.
Back to current events in Israel. The head of the Shin Bet is stepping down.
Yes, Ronan Bar, the spy chief. This follows a very public row with Prime Minister Netanyahu exposing some deep rifts at the top.
What was the core of the disagreement?
Bar emphasized accountability for the security failures leading to the October 7th attacks. Netanyahu, in turn, accused Bar of lying in an affidavit to the Supreme Court.
Serious accusations flying back and forth.
Extremely serious. Bar accused Netanyahu of demanding excessive loyalty, even ordering spying on anti-government protesters. He also stated Netanyahu expected obedience to the PM over the courts in a constitutional crisis.
And Netanyahu's response?
He accused Bar of massive and direct responsibility for the October 7th failures and claimed Bar had lost the government's confidence. Bar countered that Netanyahu's own affidavit was full of inaccuracies. His resignation might actually preempt a difficult decision for the Supreme Court on who to believe.
Now, looking at the first 100 days of the Trump administration, what are some key turning points people are discussing?
Well, there are several areas generating a lot of attention. First, the whole debate around social media and executive power kicked off partly by that tweet from VP Vance asserting executive control over the courts. That sparked a constitutional debate right away.
And the chainsaw for bureaucracy.
Right, Elon Musk's appointment to cut government waste. That led to some pretty aggressive budget cuts, shutting down agencies like USA and the Department of Education, which caused public backlash over potential impacts on popular programs. His new Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, claims huge savings, but the evidence for the biggest numbers is, reportedly thin.
Tariffs were a big early move, too.
Yes, Trump's tariff announcements caused immediate stock market drops, rising interest rates, and a dip in consumer confidence, though they did find some support in former industrial areas.
Immigration enforcement has also been prominent.
We've seen the lowest illegal border crossing numbers in 4 years, but also controversial deportations, including some permanent residents involved in pro-Palestinian protests, raising civil rights concerns about due process, and the transfer of detainees to that mega jail in El Salvador is part of that picture.
And the approach to race and identity issues.
A definite retreat. The end of federal diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, investigations into private companies, leading to some controversial outcomes like scrubbing mentions of Black and female service members from the Arlington National Cemetery website.
Finally, just the general use of executive power.
It's been very assertive, aggressively defunding programs, but also facing significant resistance from the courts. Reportedly, over 100 rulings have gone against presidential actions already in these first 100 days.
Let's look at healthcare now, specifically in Australia. Medicare is facing issues.
Yes, Australia's universal healthcare system, Medicare, is reportedly facing a crisis. Costs are rising and access, particularly to GP services, is declining.
What's the main problem? Gap fees.
Exactly. More and more people are having to pay out of pocket these gap fees for services that used to be bulk billed, meaning covered entirely by Medicare. One startup, CleanBill, found only about a fifth of GP clinics nationwide would bulk bill new adult patients.
Inceptualists.
Public specialists are overwhelmed with long waiting lists, pushing people towards expensive private care where there are no fee caps. We're hearing stories of people relying on charities, skipping dental care, even dipping into retirement savings for healthcare.
It's worse in rural areas, I imagine.
Significantly. Places like Streaky Bay are struggling just to keep any GP access. It sparked a debate about whether Medicare should remain universal or become more of a safety net. A health economist suggested the system either needs more funding or people need to accept paying reasonable fees.
Staying with politics, how are Democrats in the U.S. navigating these first 100 days?
They seem to be struggling for a unified message. There are internal divisions. Polls suggest most Democrats want strong opposition to the Republican agenda.
But there are differing views on strategy.
Yes. Some Democrats feel the party is out of step with more conservative Americans. We've seen efforts by figures like California Governor Newsom to reach out or interview right-wing figures, which has sparked controversy within the party itself.
Is there debate about leadership, too?
There is talk about generational change, and generally calls for leaders to be more vocal, to show they care and are fighting back more forcefully. It's a challenging time for the opposition.
And in South Africa, another difficult conversation, financial abuse.
Yes, this was sparked by viral videos from a female South African doctor. She shared her experience of being manipulated into funding her husband's lifestyle, leading to immense financial pressure and eventually separation.
Highlighting it affects women from all backgrounds.
Precisely. It showed that financial independence doesn't necessarily protect women, especially when it clashes with cultural norms about male authority in a relationship.
Is this recognized legally?
Yes, financial abuse is legally classified as economic abuse in South Africa. Research actually suggests women who out-earn their partners can face higher risks of intimate partner violence, sadly.
There's a cultural pressure element.
Definitely. Expectations can lead women to feel responsible for maintaining their male partner's ego or perceived status and ensuring household harmony, even if it means subsidizing them financially. People shared stories online of subtly boosting their partner's financial image.
Now, a tragic consequence of conflict. The looting of Sudan's National Museum.
Yes, a terrible loss. The museum in Khartoum has been looted and damaged amidst the ongoing conflict there. Sudanese officials are blaming the RSF militia.
Unique collections were taken.
Extremely valuable and unique items. Looting has also been reported at other museums and ancient sites in Sudan. UNESCO has warned against the illegal trade in these artifacts.
Were the artifacts protected?
Many treasures had actually been boxed up for a pre-war rehabilitation project, which, ironically, might have made them easier to remove. Officials believe the stolen items are being sold off.
A deliberate assault on identity.
That's how it's being described, a deliberate and malicious assault on Sudan's historical identity and an attempt to erase Sudan's legacy. The museum's fate really mirrors what many Sudanese people have experienced, losing their homes and possessions.
Let's shift to technology, the race for humanoid robots.
It's definitely heating up. Numerous companies globally are pushing to develop useful humanoid robots. We saw Unitree's G1 showcased in Germany recently.
What are the potential uses?
Primarily in business, as part of the workforce, but also potentially in domestic settings down the line, though the technology still faces big challenges balancing strength with safety and developing AI capable of complex tasks in unpredictable environments.
Where's the current focus?
Mostly on robots for warehouses and factories. Think Tesla's Optimus, robots used by BMW, Hyundai working with Boston Dynamics. Unitree's potential advantage seems to be lower cost.
Asia is leading in funding.
Yes, with significant government support. This actually poses challenges for Western companies in sourcing components sometimes. The real secret sauce, though, is likely to be user-friendly software for human-robot interaction.
So robots in our homes still a way off.
Realistically, probably still 10 to 15 years away for widespread, practical use in homes.
Finally, a hidden danger in Gaza's reconstruction.
Yes, a very serious one. The vast amounts of rubble created by the conflict pose a significant risk of asbestos contamination.
Why is asbestos so dangerous?
Exposure can lead to mesothelioma, which is a deadly cancer, often with a very long latency period, 20 to 60 years. The tiny asbestos fibers are easily inhaled and incredibly difficult to avoid, especially in a densely populated area like Gaza.
Is there awareness of this risk?
The immediate dangers of the conflict tend to overshadow these long-term health risks. Lack of awareness, plus the sheer challenge of rebuilding, hinders protective measures. Asbestos was found in debris after past conflicts there, too.
Are there other dust-related risks?
Yes. Silicosis from silica dust in concrete is another respiratory danger. And just general dust inhalation increases the risk of various respiratory infections and can worsen existing conditions like asthma.
Like the health effects after 9/11.
Exactly. That serves as a stark case study for the long-term health consequences of toxic dust clouds. Careful management of debris removal in Gaza is absolutely crucial to avoid disturbing asbestos further and creating future health crises down the line.
So looking back at today's stories, It really paints a picture of a world facing constant change and interconnected challenges, doesn't it? Across so many different spheres.
It really does. When you look at these events together, from power grids to conflict zones, cultural heritage to technological races, political shifts to public health concerns, you start to see underlying patterns, shared vulnerabilities. It underscores the need to stay informed.
And perhaps consider how an event seemingly far away, a policy shift, an environmental issue, a technological leap, might eventually ripple outwards and have consequences closer to home. Understanding those connections feels more important than ever,